The Doctor isn't the timeless child. The Doctor's Tecteun. Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I talk about all the geeky pop culture that I love and enjoy, things like the MCU, Star Trek, and Doctor Who. And today, I've got a Doctor Who theory for you. Now, love it or hate it, the episode The Timeless Children really shook up Doctor Who lore. We found out that regeneration came originally from the one, the only timeless child. And we're led to believe that that timeless child is in fact the Doctor. That is what the Master tells the Doctor that he has discovered within the Matrix. But what if it's all a very cunning deception by both the show and the Master in this instance? What if the Doctor is not the timeless child? What if it is, in fact, Tecteun? The Doctor is Tecteun, that is. The timeless child is somebody else, and we'll get to that at the end. This new information from the Timeless Children is something I've added on to a theory that I've had for a few years, that I've never made a video about, but I've been meaning to. It's a theory that ties together both the Timeless Children and the Timeless Child arc, the Cartmel master plan, the Morbius doctors, the Doctor being half human. Anything else? Oh yeah, and the stuff about the other. Oh! And Looms. Can't forget those Looms. From the new Adventures novels. Yeah, it's got Looms in too. As described in The Timeless Children, Tecteun was a Shobogan, the race of people native to the planet Gallifrey. She was a scientist and an explorer, and therefore was one of the first to leave the planet to go off and explore the universe. However, she can't be the only one to have left the planet at that time, as we know that before they had regeneration, the Gallifreyans, the Shobogans if you will, were indeed venturing out into space en masse. We have seen this, for instance, in the recent multi-platform crossover event Time Lord Victorious, where the Ninth Doctor in his comic Monstrous Beauty travels back to the Dark Ages and encounters Gallifreyans, non-regenerating, pre-regenerating Gallifreyans, fighting a war out there in space, not on Gallifrey, against the great vampires. At this point, we're told though that they haven't ventured far into the universe. They've pretty much not encountered much of it. In fact, it's indicated that they've only really encountered the vampires. The vampires were one of the first races they encountered when leaving the planet, and they pretty much straight away got into a war with them, which would last, well, way into when they got regeneration and indeed time travel. So a very long time. And yet, despite this fact, despite the fact that they have not ventured that far into space, in the comic Monstrous Beauty, their stereotypical arrogance is already on show because they are referring to themselves as the Space Lords, even though, I mean, they haven't gone that far into space at this point. One of the military generals in the war against the vampires that we see in Monstrous Beauty is named Rassilon. Now, we don't know for certain whether or not it is the Rassilon. Might have been a very common name, who knows. But there is certainly a Rassilon in the Dark Times who has a position of authority. This Rassilon is a dark-skinned woman with a fierce temper and authoritative stance. And, you know, you can trace the line between her and potentially the Rassilons which we have seen in other media. They could easily be the same person. Anyway, back to Tecteun. At some point on her journey, she discovers the Timeless Child. A child, alone, adrift, standing by this interdimensional gateway of some kind. No one knows where she came from. There doesn't seem to be anybody there to take responsibility for her. So Tecteun kindly adopts her and takes her back to Gallifrey. And then experiments on her. Wait, I've skipped a bit. Doesn't experiment on her straight away, although I'm sure her curiosity about where she came from factors into the fact that she takes her home. But first of all, you know, the child has a what seemingly ordinary childhood of Gallifrey. I guess she's playing on top of cliff tops, as you do. You fall over, as you do. Plummet to your death, as you do. But that's when everything changes. That's when Tecteun observes the first regeneration. The Timeless Child regenerates into a new body. What is going on? Tecteun is intrigued, wants to know, and as a scientist, does those experiments I alluded to a second ago. Eventually, Tecteun manages to replicate what is within the DNA of this child in order to allow them to regenerate, and replicate it and distributes it to the rest of her species. Well, maybe not the rest, some of her species. The elite of her species, maybe? This drove Gallifrey's advancement further and faster than it had ever done before. And Tecteun, along with 2 others, would lead Gallifrey into their next stage of advancement. So that's what we know. Let's get to some speculation. The script that was released for The Timeless Child does indeed identify the 3 mysterious people walking down the corridor, the people that during the voiceover is talking about the people that built Gallifrey up and formed their society and moulded their society. We know one is Tecteun, we know the other is Rassilon according to the script, and the third is Omega. Omega has been a feature of Doctor Who before. He was the stellar engineer that really was vital in developing time travel for the species, and during his experiments got sucked into a black hole and later on became a villain for the 3rd Doctor and the 5th, was it? And we know who Rassilon is, leader of the Society, later resurrected for the Time War to lead them into battle. We've seen him portrayed by Timothy Dalton on television, by various actors in Big Finish, and Donald Sumter, I think, on television as well. Now, also in the past of Doctor Who, we've had reference to the 3 people that formed Gallifrey Society, the triumvirate of Gallifreyan society, and that is Omega, Rassilon, and one person only up until now known as the Other. Here, I think it's quite clear that Tecteun is that Other. But that's not the main thrust of this theory. The main thrust isn't that the Other is Tecteun, the main thrust is that the Doctor is Tecteun, and therefore the Doctor is the Other. So why do I think that? Well, if we take what we know about Gallifreyan society and the fact that the Other was part of this triumvirate as far as we've been told in the past of Doctor Who, then Tecteun must be the Other, and we've been told, or hinted at, by various things, especially around the 1980s and into the Virgin New Adventures novels, that the Other is the Doctor. This has been referred to as the Cartmel Master Plan, and as I said, that thread was picked up and ran with by the Virgin New Adventures novels as well. Now, talking of the Virgin New Adventures novels, another infamous addition to the lore that they provided was that of Looms, supposedly the way Time Lords were born. None of this hanky-panky and, natural birth for the Time Lords. No. Their DNA gets loomed together in these machines, and thus a Time Lord is created. I have to admit, I haven't read the New Adventures books, but I'm just quick Google on Wiki, on TARDIS Wiki, and that's what I've got. I will come back to the Looms in a minute. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, of course, was the infamous line in the TV movie,
"I'm half human on my mother's side."
Something all but ignored by the TV show since then, although the occasional Big Finish and other apocryphal media does mention it. So all of these elements I wanted to wrap into one big theory for who the Doctor is. So here's how I think it might have gone down. Now, assuming the Doctor is Tecteun, then after developing this regeneration, they work with Rassilon and Omega and build up Time Lord Society together. As, they form it, they're the leaders of the society. Omega particularly is working on time travel. He harnesses the power of a black hole, forming it into the Eye of Harmony, and they use that to power time travel. Unfortunately, during the experiments, he's lost in the black hole. Now, it's implied in a few expanded universe stories that Rassilon might have had something to do with Omega's disappearance into the black hole, and yeah, that kind of checks out with what we've seen of him on TV in the last decade or so.
Thank you for your opinion. I will not die!
Not a nice guy, that Rassilon. Pretty underhanded, pretty power hungry, pretty sure he'd do anything to get his own way, including murdering somebody who, up until that point, we presume had considered him a friend. But what if Omega wasn't the only one he wanted to get rid of? What if he also wanted to get rid of Tecteun? Because what if he wanted to take credit for developing regeneration? He already half took credit for developing time travel. Perhaps he wasn't successful in completely writing out Omega's contribution to that, to the developments. Perhaps after that he thought he'd be a little bit more methodical with Tecteun and get rid of her completely so that everyone just believed he was the person that came up with regeneration. Because that's what we've been told up until now, that as the founder of Time Lord Society, we've been led to believe that regeneration was a gift by Rassilon. So it seems the Gallifreyan Society had completely forgotten about Tecteun. So what happened to them? Well, Rassilon obviously needed to get rid of them. But Tecteun's a smart egg, you know? Scientist, very intelligent person, has seen the universe, probably encountered a few bad guys in their time, has a rough idea of what's going on here, and starts to suspect Rassilon might be aiming to discreetly get rid of them. So Tecteun starts to devise a plan to get away from Rassilon and go into hiding. But how would he do that? How would Tecteun disguise themselves so that Rassilon could never find them? This is where Looms come in. We know Tecteun must be an expert on genetics because, well, look what they did with regeneration, managing to splice it from a completely different species into their own. So let's assume that Tecteun developed the Loom technology for use in Time Lord Society. Perhaps they were having a bit of a fertility crisis at the time and therefore developed this technology so that some families could start using it instead of conceiving the natural way. Less fun, but what are you gonna do? But Tecteun also understands that this could be their way out, their way of getting out of Rassilon's way and never being able to be found. Because Looms can splice in DNA from multiple sources. Looms in a real world, our world context, are things that weave different fabrics together. Well, this can weave different DNA together. Now let's assume this plan has taken many millennia to come to fruition. All the time Tecteun is skillfully never putting themselves in a position where Rassilon could get rid of them without being found out, without being exposed, and therefore, you know, just sort of being very careful over these millenniums and several lifetimes and several bodies. These are probably where the Morbius doctors come in. During those lifetimes, these are the doctors' faces. Or Tecteun's faces. But when Tecteun finds that Rassilon is going to move against them, it's time to act. Tecteun feeds themselves into the Loom, along with, and this is the important part, the DNA of another species from this little strange blue and green planet called Earth, splicing and looming the two species together to come out the other side. But something goes wrong. Perhaps the process is interrupted. Perhaps they're only just stepping into the Loom as Rassilon's guards burst into the room and fire a bolt, hit the machine, something goes wrong, something explodes, blah 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 blah. And Tecteun doesn't emerge from the other side. Rassilon has won. Or so he thinks. Many thousands of years pass. The time of Rassilon comes to an end and Gallifrey forgets about Tecteun altogether, crediting regeneration purely to Rassilon. And then, one day, through some means, perhaps a group that had discovered a little bit of the true history of the planet, maybe just a smidgen, not enough to know what was going on, but enough to decide to follow the clues, had reactivated the Loom that just so happened to contain the DNA of the human and Tecteun. And out emerges a small child. This child must be protected and therefore is sent out of the city and to a foster family out in the sort of desert regions to be raised in a farm, perhaps in a barn. That child has no memory of any previous lives and therefore just grows up thinking they are an ordinary child of Gallifrey. One day, they decide to join the Gallifrey Time Lord Academy. They make friends with a fellow Time Lord who would one day go on to be called the Master. And they live life not knowing their own history. They marry, have children, have grandchildren. And then one day when their new first regeneration is old, they stumble upon just a smidgen of the truth. Not enough to realise anything about what's really going on, but enough to know that their life and the life of their family may be in danger if other people found out. This is confirmed when somebody does find out, and his family start being murdered. One by one. This is confirmed when it's revealed somebody else does know and has discovered his true identity, and most of his family is murdered in one night. The man himself manages to get away with just his granddaughter and escape in a TARDIS to flee his planet. Occasionally, some regenerations would have fleeting memories resurface about various elements of his own story, but but he would never be able to put his finger on it. The Fourth Doctor, while facing Morbius in a mind battle, would briefly remember previous incarnations. The Seventh Doctor would refer to himself as far more than just an ordinary Time Lord. Perhaps he didn't quite know what, but something. He knew something was about him that was different. And the Eighth Doctor somehow knew that he was half human. And that is my theory that can tie in the Timeless Child, Tecteun, the other, Looms, the half-human, and the Cartmel master plan, and the other, all into one theory. But wait a minute. If the Doctor's Tecteun, who's the Timeless Child? Well, I've suggested this before, but I'd go with the Master. It would make the Master's actions in Series 12 make so much more sense if he had discovered that he had been the one that had their ability stolen from them by the Time Lords and given out to everyone, that had been experimented on, that had been betrayed by the person that he now considers, or at least at one point had considered, a friend. And it's absolutely the kind of thing the Master would do, to then turn that on the Doctor, lie to her, play mind games with her and make her think that the Timeless Child was her when all along she was Tecteun. Now you may be thinking, yes, but the Doctor remembers the Brendan stuff, the stuff that was covered up by the Matrix with a kind of sheen, a glimmer of Island over the top of it to disguise it. Don't forget that in most of those scenes that we see in Island, the Tecteun character, or the Tecteun equivalent, is right there along with the Timeless Child. Brendan has his mentor with him almost the whole time, almost in every scene. From falling from the cliff to being in the police station. The Tecteun equivalent is there the whole time. So maybe that's what the Doctor's remembering. Not being the Timeless Child in those situations and having their mind wiped, but being Tecteun and watching the Master get their mind wiped. I think it fits quite nicely. It's just a theory, but one I think has a lot of potential. Let me know what you think. Do you like it? Is there any bits of it you would change, maybe tweak a little bit, or do you have your own wild theory that could tie all of these things together? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching this theory video. I'm Phil. I'll be back for more Doctor Who videos soon, so do hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.